beneath a khaki sky on a brisk, desolate weekday morning just after Christmas 1991. Bill Clinton's mother gave me a tour of Hot Springs, Arkansas, the town where she had raised her two boys through a succession of family melodramas. Virginia Kelly was an unlikely but wonderfully American candidate to be the mother of a president. She was the sort of woman whom proper folks tend to scorn, particularly in the South. A ton of makeup, almost comically applied, a white streak down the middle of her dyed black hair. Some of the locals called her Skunk Woman. A passion for the racetrack, for nightlife. Hot Springs had been a notorious Bible Belt Gomorrah, and for the wrong sort of men. And yet, Mrs. Kelly was not at all pathetic. She was canny and formidable and charming, an entertaining guide who, in the course of our day together, managed to ask all the right political questions and also to make some very astute predictions. "I think the press is going to give Bill a lot of trouble." She sighed. "Don't you?" At one point she startled me. "That's the church where I go to my AA meetings," she said, nodding toward a prim Protestant outpost of recent vintage. "Are you an alcoholic?" she interrupted me. "No, but I had one for a husband and a drug addict for a son, and I get a certain amount of comfort from the meetings." This was not entirely convincing. She had the leathery look of a woman who knew her way around a cocktail lounge. But the attempted subterfuge wasn't nearly as important as the door opened by her admission. Mrs. Kelly lived in the 12-step world. She was practiced in a stylized, jargon-buffered sort of candor. She proceeded to tell me horrific stories, all of which she had undoubtedly rehearsed, sitting with her fellow fallen in a circle of metal folding chairs in the linoleum and cinder-block church basement. Most of the stories had not been divulged to the press before, though. She told me about guns brandished about the house and accidentally fired by her alcoholic husband Roger, who was Bill's stepfather. She told me about the time Bill had smashed through the bedroom door and stopped her drunken husband from abusing her. She told me that she and Bill and her younger son, Roger, had gone into family therapy together after Roger was busted for cocaine. While Bill was governor, the surveillance and arrest took place with Bill's prior approval. The last was an admission that I didn't appreciate sufficiently at the time. Bill Clinton was the first American president to admit that he had participated in a form of psychotherapy. One imagines him totally cooperative, wildly eloquent, emotionally accessible, flagrantly remorseful, and completely in control of the situation, 3 steps ahead of the therapist. The analysand from hell. Several days later, as I traveled with Clinton through New Hampshire, he was in the process of taking that first primary state by storm, a process snuffed a few weeks later by the twin revelations that he'd had an extramarital affair with a lounge singer, and that he'd not quite told the truth about his efforts to avoid military service in Vietnam. I asked Clinton what he'd learned in family therapy, and whether it had been odd growing up in a family where the 2 career paths turned out to be getting elected governor and becoming a cocaine addict. "Well," he said without hesitation, "there are different sorts of addictions." By which I assumed he meant, I was quite frankly too embarrassed to pursue this very aggressively, that his addiction was to fame and success and glory. Of course, even if I had pursued it, Clinton undoubtedly would have used some brilliant tactic to skitter away. At least, that's how I now rationalize my journalistic incompetence. But the conversation did establish an important subtext for Clinton's success as a politician in the 1990s. His thorough mastery of the therapeutic vocabulary and the trompe-l'oeil sense of intimacy it provided.